Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining the webinar today. This is hosted by Healthy Careers and Jackson Physician Search. My name is Tony Stadehar, and I'll be the moderator for the panel discussion. I'm the president of Jackson Physician Search, and we recruit physicians, physician executives, advanced practice providers for healthcare organizations all across the U.S. And I'm really excited that you're taking the time to join us today. We have about 400 people signed up to hear from our esteemed panel who discuss how they deconstruct the recruitment process into a series of manageable steps, each with identified goals, metrics to help them assess what's working and what needs improvement. So you'll learn how they use the physician recruitment funnel to really optimize their day-to-day operations and use data for planning and how to improve their results. So you'll take away new ideas for how your organization can adopt and optimize each of these stages of the recruiting funnel in our hopes. So let's go to the next slide, and we're going to start by reviewing a few housekeeping items for you. First, the session is being recorded and will be emailed to you. And we encourage you to ask questions using the Q&A button on your console. We'll try to answer as many questions during today's live session as we can. If we aren't able to get to your question, we'll be following up with more information after the webinar. And finally, we'll be doing a few polls during the webinar and would love your participation if you don't mind. You should have a pop-up appear with the poll and a list of answers to select from. So next, I'd like to just tell you we've gathered a really great panel for today's discussion, and I'd like to go around the room and have the speakers introduce themselves. So maybe we start with Karen, and then we'll just go in order after that.
Thanks, Tony. So great to be with all the panelists today and be able to share some information. I'm the Senior Director of Physician and Provider Recruitment for Banner Health. I have been with Banner for 15 years, all in recruitment, all recruiting physicians and or providers. I stepped into my Senior Director role February of 2020, which we can all think of where we were back then and what was happening, what was starting to happen. Previous to that role, I was a sourcing director for about 8 years and actually was in a sourcing staff role prior to that. So I know quite a bit about sourcing and how to build pipelines and how to ultimately sign candidates. For perspective, Banner is an organization in 6 states, about 52,000 employees. Last year in 2020, we signed 847 providers, 94 of which were COVID. So it's important to point out. This year, likely we'll have about 850 hires across our systems in 6 states. So very robust team, large team. We currently have 47 team members.
That's great. And next, let's see who we have next. Priyanki?
Yes. So thanks, Tony.
Sure.
I'm Priyanki Amroliwala. I am the Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition for 42 North Dental. 42 North Dental basically is a Boston-based dental services organization. We call it a DSO, or a dental support organization. And we have almost about 105 practices, dental practices. Like I had mentioned, we're based out of the Boston area, but we definitely have dental practices kind of all throughout the US. So we're obviously in Massachusetts, New Hampshire, Maine, Connecticut, New York, Pennsylvania, Indiana, and Michigan. So we're all across several different states here. We're very much of a growing organization. And as everyone here that must be listening, when you work for a growing organization, the need to hire talent is definitely there, especially when you're working for a company that is a dental practice. So my responsibility is to help grow this organization by hiring dentists and specialists all across all 105 practices that we have within the organization. So in layman's terms, I'm responsible for overseeing all of the doctor recruiting for this company. I've been with this organization for over 6 years, and obviously I was here pre-pandemic and obviously here throughout the pandemic, and now kind of sort of post-pandemic. And obviously I've seen a huge shift in the way that recruitment is done, and just working through different types of modules and different types of ways to strategize and hire as many doctors as possible. So thanks.
Great. And last but not least, Nicole.
Thank you. So happy to be here with you guys today. My name is Nicole Gillard. I'm currently the Senior Director of Medical Staff Development for Community Health Systems, CHS. You might know us by that name. We are a hospital organization. We own 83 hospitals across 16 states. Our hospitals range from, small, mid-sized type communities, all the way to larger, areas right outside of metro areas. I started my healthcare career at a local hospital here in Nashville, and I was the marketing, physician relations, physician recruitment person. That morphed into strictly a physician recruitment role where I handled everything. And then after 3 years, I accepted a position with CHS. I started off as a regional director recruiting for some of our communities in Arkansas, Texas, Arizona, Indiana. The way our department is structured, we do everything. We're centralized here in Nashville, and we do everything from, medical staff planning through sourcing, assisting the hospitals with coordinating their site visits. And then we also do all of the contract negotiation here in our office. And so I still recruit for our hospitals in Arizona and Texas, but I also oversee our team at corporate, and we work closely with our hospital contacts, and those might range from an actual dedicated recruiter all the way to a CEO. So kind of a unique role, because we're recruiting for such a diverse set of needs, and we have, CEOs who are running hospitals who we're trying to engage with and help recruit. So the industry has changed so much, and I'm excited to share with the other panelists kind of what we've learned.
Great, thank you all. What a great panel. So excited to have y'all. Now let's do this to get an idea of your experience with today's topics. Let's just do a quick poll question. So the question is, do you use the recruiting funnel in practice today? So it's an easy one. Yes, no, or sort of. We'll give you about 30 seconds for everybody to weigh in. Okay, so about a third and a third and a third. Okay, all right. So over half of you are somewhat familiar with it. So that's good. Well, let's get into it a little bit and start digging in so we can get to our questions. But this is kind of a look how we define the physician recruitment funnel. As you see, it starts with employment branding and awareness and moves all the way down to onboarding. So on the right side, we have some metrics you can use to track your performance at each stage. So for example, if you're not getting enough applications or high quality candidates, you need to think about revising your job postings to incorporate most best practices. If your apply rate to phone screens is low, you may not be getting the right type of applies, which could also point to needing to update your job description so you can refine the qualifications needed for the role as well. And then if your phone screen to interview is low, there may be a problem in screening thoroughly enough, and you need to work on that with your people. If you find your interview to offer is less than 25%, that generally indicates something is probably going wrong during the interview process. And then if your offer to hire rate is low, your compensation package may not be competitive enough in your market, and you might want to be assessing that as well. So when you understand your metrics for each stage, you can work backwards to estimate just how many activities you need to get done with one hire. Now that we've done somewhat of an introduction to the physician recruiting funnel, let's start understanding really how our panelists are utilizing these tools to help them be more successful. So I really want to hear from all you panelists on this. So we'll start with Karen, but Karen, how do you calculate ROI and success? And then the follow-up question would be, do you look at spend and hires? And then last question on that area would be, do you have set goals for each stage of the recruitment funnel?
You know, those are great questions. And metrics, a couple of years ago, metrics really became very prevalent in recruiting. Everybody wanted to know what your metrics, how do you measure success? We recently, over the last couple of years, actually during the pandemic, moved to a new recruitment platform that gave us some more robust, deeper recruiting tools, as well as how we measure success. So I can give you some perspective. In hiring the 840 some odd physicians last year, we know that to do that, we actually had 8,700 plus candidates or applicants. So if you look at the big picture, it's a 10-to-1 applicant to hire ratio. We could break that down in terms of service lines, primary care specialties. Our primary care is about a 5-to-1 ratio. We typically will hire a lot of hospitalists in any given year. And because we have so many positions in hospitalists, that ratio is about a 3-to-1. So we do use that. We have an overall recruitment budget for what we call our foundational tools. And those are things like Healthy Careers, a lot of our nationwide job boards, some of our social media, anything that is related specific to that position, we charge back to the benefiting facility that is actually recruiting for that. So we figure all of those costs into ROI. And you do have to pay attention to that because you have to be a good steward of your budget. Nobody, I would guarantee you, nobody has an open checkbook. You've got to figure out where your economies of scale come into play, where you can use tools like Healthy Careers and other big beast of a job board, I would call them. But also then how you can find those little needles in the haystack, because we all know we have those. There really aren't any unicorns out there, but there are candidates that you can find if you really have a strategic plan on how to find some of those. So, I mean, I could talk forever on sourcing because that's kind of what my DNA is, and that's where I cut my teeth in healthcare. One of the questions I always get, something's been open 6 months, 9 months. We all know the story. What can you do more creatively? What can you find that you're not doing? Tony is shaking his head and he's, kind of joking. When we met I'm going to steal this from you, Tony. When we met about a week ago, and Tony said this very eloquently, is you have to kiss a lot of frogs to find a prince. And my similar saying is you have to shoot free throws every day. And the fact of the matter is there's lots of things that you can tweak in your sourcing strategy, whether it's market visibility, it's social media, it's conferences, it's one-on-ones, it's referrals, it's firms, it's a lot of that. But the thing is you have to be consistent with your process, and you can't lose sight of those foundational things. So I'm going to stop there because there's plenty of other
one quick follow-up questions, because I didn't anticipate this, but so when you see the 10-to-1 and it goes down to 3-to-1 and that sort of thing, is there one like trick you go to that kind of tweak it to say, what could we do? Could it be putting an extra body on this specialty, or do you have a trick of the trade you can share?
I will tell you, I have a sourcing team because we are a team of specialists. The majority of our recruiters are not full cycle. They're supported by sourcing. And so there's a lot that goes into that. And there is transactional work with sourcing. We all know that. But in terms of making sure you get information and candidate profile data out of the gate, we do intakes with all of our new open positions to make sure your messaging is fresh, relevant, location specific. In some states, we can put compensation, not all, and not all of our stakeholders want that. But if you're really trying to drive traffic, you've got to be innovative enough to not be married to the first message that you have out there. You've got to refresh it. I've got a sourcing strategist that loves social media, loves a tool called Doximity. And there's, a lot of different things you can do with tools like that. So I think it's a variety of things, but we kind of give our sourcing team free rein, to work within some pretty wide boundaries. And, they all love their jobs. And part of it is just being willing to try different things and digging in.
Good. Why don't we just go next to Priyanki? You want to weigh in on those same questions?
Yeah, I would say, I feel like Karen has done a great job with answering everything thoroughly. So there's not really much of my expertise that I can add other than I definitely agree with her. I think the biggest thing is, what I've seen over the years is people get really kind of too much into metrics, but in the end, it kind of all boils down to the actual recruitment team and that recruitment process. So we've also done a lot of like kind of assessments as to, where we stand with the interview process. Number one, I will tell you first and foremost, if everyone's listening and I can give someone free advice, is stop taking so long to do an interview. Like, you know what? If you have one physician candidate, like that's one physician, that's all you're going to get. Number one, like that's all you're going to get that your sourcing team has created for you. So don't sit on it. So do yourself a favor, move it along as soon as possible. And I think in layman's terms, when I say as soon as possible, in a business setting, as long as you can move on any candidate within 24 hours, that is the secret sauce. So if you get a candidate that's interested, the recruitment team needs to respond in 24 hours. Then you have your hiring manager. Your hiring manager needs to respond in 24 hours. And then you bring them in for the interview. That cannot be done like 3 weeks later just because your calendar is booked out. So this is the biggest thing that I've been doing with my organization. And I feel like everyone here probably has those same struggles. Everyone talks about how it's so hard to find talent and, doctor recruiting is such a struggle and, there's not enough people out there. And that's absolutely correct. But now let's just move things along when you have a talented team of talent acquisition folks that can even source you that one candidate, take that candidate and run with them. So don't just say you're busy and you book it out for 3 weeks later. The interview should be done within 1 week. So we feel like 1 week is a good enough amount of time. And the interview needs to be done not based on your availability. It has to be based on the candidate's availability. And I will say that again, not based on your availability. It has to be based on the candidate's availability. So all these physicians, they're busy either practicing all day, every day, or if they're in residency, then they've probably got even a crazier schedule. So we have to work around their hours. The fact of the matter is they really can't take time out of their residency to do these interviews. That is the truth. And when they're a practicing physician or a dentist or whatever, they're seeing patients all day. So they can't cancel their patients. So you got to talk to them early in the morning or in the evenings or then over the weekends, which I think most people must agree. Most of our hiring parties aren't excited about doing that, but it has to be done. And I feel like if you can kind of slice that time and give them that extra level of service, they'll feel really special and they'll feel like, oh man, they understand, like I'm at my residency all day and you know what, they get it and they're doing their best to talk to me over the weekend, or they're doing their best to talk to me at 7 or 8 o'clock in the evening when most people are having dinner. So like those small things go a long way. And kind of like what you were talking about, Tony, like you said that earlier, you talked about how like if there is an issue with after sending out your offer and you consistently get a lot of rejections, then look at your compensation rate. Like it's simple, just do a little market analysis, and it doesn't have to be like where you have to hire these great firms, which you could do, but like all you got to do is really see like what your other competitors are paying. And nowadays we're also transparent about pay, like you kind of have to be. So you can just go on Indeed or even like Healthy Careers, and you can go on all these sites and see who's paying what. And then you'll really get to understand like if you're actually at that market level or not. So
Absolutely.
anyway,
So it sounds like the moral of the story is time kills deals.
yeah.
And as Rick Jackson said, he coined this back in the late 70s, in the early 80s, was groceries to garbage. So if you buy new groceries, you leave them out long enough, they're going to become garbage. So good points, very good points. Keep that in mind. But Nicole, we put a little bit of info, so I'm sure you've got a lot to add to those two.
They pretty much covered a lot of it. I know you guys want to get to the next question, but I'll just add that as far as ROI, we're looking at signs. I mean, we are looking at all the different metrics, right? But because our hospitals are so in such different areas, right? We've got more rural areas compared to a metro area. Our metrics have to be different. We're not going to have the same phone interview to site visit rate that we do in Birmingham, right? In a small town in New Mexico. And so we kind of have to juggle that sometimes. And then honestly, retention, which is difficult because we are more on the front end process. And while I do carry it through the contract, then I'm passing it along. So I don't have a whole lot of control over retention, but at the same time, that's kind of what defines our success is if we find a quality physician who's a good fit for that community and practice. I feel like sometimes we get into this mindset of just get them as many referrals as we can. There's a lot of pressure to fill this need. And sometimes we're sending candidates who we might be trying to, squeeze into that need. We want to make sure that we get the right candidates. The other thing I would say is as far as timeliness, yeah, we struggle with that sometimes. As I mentioned, we've got a lot of hospital contacts handling recruitment who are also running the hospital. So as much as we're trying to drive home, 100 other recruiters are talking to this candidate. If you let 2 weeks go by, forget it, they're gone. Sometimes we can't control their schedule. So it's an interesting industry the past few years, just with social media and everything changing so much. I would also say that just how you track your metrics is important. We've had some struggles with the current database that we're using. If you have a database that doesn't make those things visible, it can sometimes be hard to put all those pieces together. So I think otherwise it got covered. I don't have anything, I think everyone always wants that magic bullet. It's like Karen said, we hear that all the time. What can we do that no one else is doing? What can we try that? It's like, I wish I had the answer, but a lot of times there is no magic bullet. It's just foundation, like you said, shooting free throws until you win.
That's right. Well, you hit on retention. It's so critical. And as a recruiter, you really have little control over that. I mean, and of course we hear it from the outside as well. People are going, well, yeah, you recruited these doctors, but 2 years later, this doctor might be gone. But if you all get a chance, feel free to call, reach out to us. Our most recent, 2 of our 3 most recent white papers had to do with retention. And it's mind-boggling the difference between what administration feels and what physicians feel. And the feeling from physicians that's predominantly there is no retention program. There's nothing going on, while the administration thinks, oh yeah, we got a great retention program. So, it may be out of your scope, but if you can help influence your leaders in the hospital settings to get them building some kind of retention and engaging the physicians, you're going to be way better off in the long run, and you won't have to be recruiting it over and over again. So with that said, Nicole, let me keep you on line since you had to go third. Let's have you go with the next one. So which part of the recruiting process do you have the most trouble with? Now that's your people.
Right. For us, I think that finding dedicated time to source passive candidates is our biggest challenge. I think we do a really great job with the candidates who are actively looking. We utilize Healthy Careers a lot, Practice Link, Practice Match, Doximity. So I feel like we captured the candidates who are out there with their names on the job boards. But we all know that passive candidates take a lot more time and effort. They take a lot of digging. And so it's sort of a balance all the time of how much time can we spend doing that passive work when we're responding. You know, I feel like we've always had the conversation that we don't want to be reactive, we want to be proactive. But as everyone knows, you have a certain amount of staff and you have a certain amount of openings, and you can't always control that. So we've really had to prioritize across our 450 openings. You know, sometimes that's hard. We need help of leadership because, of course, everyone thinks their need is the most important. But we've kind of created this category list, right? Immediate replacement, urgent replacement, something that's succession planning. And so we ask our sourcers to dedicate their time using that list so that we can look and, you know, that they are trying to capture the candidates who aren't there looking on job boards. I think it might have been from Jackson where I read the stat that 76% of physicians are passive candidates, right. You know, so you have to find other ways to capture them. And they're also the candidates that you probably have to engage with 2, 3, 5, 7 times. And some of those things are more indirect, like employer branding and, you know, social media, just to capture their attention because they're not out there just asking for a new job. So yeah, I think sourcing passive candidates for sure has been our biggest challenge the past few years.
Yeah, that's a great point. And you're absolutely right. I believe it's, I should know my own stat, right? I think it's something like 13% are active job seekers. That's a pretty small percentage. Now, keep in mind, it only takes one to fill that position, but still there's a big pool out there if you can figure out how to capitalize on it. But you're right, human capital for you as well plays into that. So let's go. I won't keep putting Priyanka in the middle. So let's go with Karen next on this one.
Yeah, you know what? If there's one thing our team would say is help me get more capacity to source. There's a question in the chat about metrics in terms of what's a workload. And, you know, if you think about sourcing, you think about the funnel, remember the picture of the funnel. Sourcing is the open door. You're the porch to the house. You've got to bring people through the door, and our sourcing team manages and keeps a track of all of the positions that are open. And you think about, you know, if you have a 1 to 3 or 1 to 4 applicant to interview metric, the sourcing team really handles all the applicants, and a fourth of those or a third of those are going to, in our book of business, is our recruiters. So sourcing capacity is just golden if you can get it. And it's my job as a leader and the rest of our leaders to help them create that. So to Nicole's point, you know, we're going through some prioritization too, is we can't actively source all of our positions because, you know, we're almost at 800 openings and we just can't do that. So we have to help our team create more capacity. And we're looking at some innovative ways, some out of the box ways to get more time. What's the magic number in terms of what somebody should hold? We always said that sourcing the sweet spot is 75 positions. Unfortunately, most of our team is higher than that. I'm not sure 75 is the right number. I would be curious to know, and you can put it in the chat too, what are recruiters' average books of business? AAPPR will state one thing, but it depends on how you're set up. We have recruiters managing anywhere from 40 to 110 positions.
Wow.
And I think that's probably common.
I bet they sleep lightly.
Well, we're trying to help that. And, you know, we've got to, because it's not sustainable. But I think the market is such right now in terms of the need, but we're all trying to do the same thing, right? We're all trying to find those candidates that fill our positions.
Yeah. Priyanka, how about the dentist market?
Same thing. Really, really hard, really difficult, very less talent, a lot of competition. I'm sure everyone's going to laugh, but they agree. A lot of sign-on bonuses right now being thrown out. So just trying to do our best here. I kind of agree with obviously Karen and Nicole. We're all speaking the same language here. Some of our biggest struggles is we just don't have enough time to actually source. That's just what it is. Where, the recruitment team is so busy trying to put out fires. So it's truly just hard for us to be very proactive. And the fact of the matter is, when you're looking to hire physicians, you actually do have to be proactive, and you actually do have to go out and continuously source talent. And most of our recruiters are lacking, not in terms of skill, but in terms of time, because they just don't have the time to source. So kind of agree with, especially what Nicole and Karen had said on that. And yeah, it's a very tough market, just because, as I had mentioned, it's very little talent. There's a lot of people hiring. When I say a lot, like everyone's hiring. And it has been very, very difficult. So.
Okay. Karen, let me throw this next one out to you to start. How do you balance an influx of new openings with activities you need to do in order to bring in candidates? I know it's not always realistic to add more recruiters. So what do you find works for you when it comes to an influx of a lot of new openings? Maybe you acquired another hospital, or another hospital just had a massive exodus of a hospitalist system. So now you got to hire all the hospitals for that hospital.
I was just going to ask you, Tony, if you were somehow a fly on the wall in my earlier meetings that we're having at corporate, because that's what we're talking about, is recruitment strategy. We've had a heavy influx of positions, and we can't go to HR every month and say, oh, we're up by another 30, give us more resources. But what you've got to do is you've got to take a look at what you're doing, how you can possibly realign, how you can prioritize. I'm going to take that from Nicole again, because we talked about that last week in our practice, and we have to prioritize, because if everything's a priority, nothing is.
Right.
And I bet you anybody on the call, if you talk to stakeholders or your hiring leaders, you'd say, okay, we've got 30 positions in your service lines, hospitals, whatever. Tell me which ones are priority. And you probably get a pause, and it would be, well, all of them are. So let's just keep it that way. Well, we can't do that. And so we have to figure out a way to give our teams some breathing room, some more capacity, a little bit more work-life balance, because I don't want to be up at 2 o'clock thinking about the hospitalist roles. So that's one of the things. However, it sometimes is the right answer in terms of adding resources, and you have to make a case for that. You can't just go and say, you know what, we're busy. I need 2 more recruiters and a sourcer. We have to prioritize and say, this is what we're going to do to try and help impact some of the spikes. But, this is what we need to do, to help address positions, because we know time to fill is roughly 10 months to a year. And if you add credentialing on that, it's, another 90 days.
Nicole, how about you? Can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute. Not to repeat myself, but we have handled that by prioritizing. There's no other way for us to do it. I think that COVID brought some challenges as far as figuring out how to staff appropriately, because our needs did go down for some time. And so then when things started to ramp back up again, we thought, well, do we need more staff, or are we going to have another spike, and are we going to slow down again? And so the last 18 months have been very interesting. But we have gotten to the point now where we have made the case for more staff. We've been able to show that if we can source more candidates, we do save money. And so we don't always have the ability to do that. And I know a lot of companies don't. And I feel like our recruiters are still handling a volume that's higher than we would like. But, we're trying everything possible. Our recruiters are currently aligned by region. So I think there's some room for us to sometimes be more efficient if we have a layer that maybe recruits by specialty. So we're just trying some different things. So yeah.
And I'm assuming you're getting some of that too, Priyanki. It sounds like you're getting new states here and there and things keep coming at you. So how do you all handle it?
Same thing as Nicole and Karen. I mean, they're all priorities. And like Karen said, when they're all a priority, nothing becomes a priority. So what we do, I mean, one good thing that we do, Tony, is I work for an organization that we have an amazing executive team. I get a lot of support from my execs. So I basically have them on my side to kind of back me up on a lot of different initiatives that we want to do. And they also obviously approve a lot for me financially on our budget as well to make things rocking and rolling. So that's a good thing. I think if anyone, you know, I don't know how everyone else's organizations are, but for me, you know, the blessing is I had the executive team on my side. So for anyone that needs advice, like get your execs to really understand what this looks like, because it is extremely hard to find these types of providers and these talent, especially in this market. So if you can get buy-in from your execs, I feel like you'll get a lot of support accordingly. And the good thing is my execs, they're very much involved in my day-to-days of recruiting. So, which is good and bad, but let's just say it's good for the most part. And the good thing is because I have their buy-in, I basically had like daily and weekly meetings and reports that I've given to them. So anytime during the process, if I have my hiring stakeholders that are, you know, not doing the right thing and, you know, not responding in a timely manner or, you know, not making recruiting a priority, it's easy. I get the execs are like, nope, you need to take care of this right away. So I think, and I don't think I always had this, but I feel like now I have that power from them and their blessings and support. So it's easy to make things rock and roll. And in terms of priorities, because the execs are so involved in the doctor recruiting piece, that all obviously generates revenue, right? So the way that we kind of prioritize, we understand that everything is a priority, but we end up just doing, we end up just doing it based on financials. So whichever practice is probably suffering the most due to not having a provider ends up being a priority. So it's actually nice. My CHRO every week will send me like 3 biggest priorities for the organization. So I essentially just go by that, and that's all based on financials. So whichever practice is suffering the most due to not having a provider is really how we prioritize.
That makes sense. Nicole, let me ask you something. Tell me how y'all approach employment branding, and in your mind, how important do you think that is? You're still on mute.
I'm not gonna mute myself again. Sorry about that. It's a timely question because we've been having a lot of conversations about this internally. You know, for a lot of years, we tended to brand our hospitals and our markets because that's where we wanted the physicians to go. And we felt like maybe they weren't as familiar with an organization, you know, that was based out of Tennessee. But I think over the past 2 or 3 years, we've learned that we do need to be branding a lot more because of those passive candidates, right? So maybe, and the younger generation, so maybe they're not looking for jobs on Instagram or Facebook or even LinkedIn, but if you have your employer name out there, you may be able to connect with them in a you know, less formal way than just applying for a job. So we're really dedicating some time and resources to building our employee branding. And I think a lot of that is we've not probably been as active as we should on social media. We haven't had a super strong strategy there because in the past, again, we found that it didn't really work necessarily to find candidates who were willing to apply, but I think we were missing, you know, the fact that we could make our organization well known. And I think that as far as branding, it does matter too when you're trying to recruit out a few years, right? The candidates are looking, I mean, I've heard of first year family medicine residents who are already committed. And so at that point, if we're trying to work with the residents and work with the residency programs, we might not know yet, where all our positions are going to be. But if we can brand as a company, as an employer, then we can engage with them early, keep the relationship going, and then hopefully at the time when they're ready, they'll think of us.
Absolutely. Karen, how about banner?
I think branding really started to peak about 2018 into 19, and then we all had to kind of circle the wagons during the pandemic. But branding is key, and I've been sourcing for 8-9 years, and I think I've been very fortunate because Banner has invested in some of our branding from a physician recruitment standpoint. We used to go to conferences, and I'm not saying that conferences are absolute must, but 10 years ago, we would go to the SHM conference and people would come up and say, well, who's Banner? And tell me about you. And now the same recruiters can go to SHM pre-pandemic and come up and say, Banner, I've heard about you. I know that you're headquartered in Phoenix. So over time, your branding is going to work, but you have to have the support and the commitment as an organization to make sure your recruitment brand out there is strong and it tells a message. There is a consumer brand, and our facilities, our hospitals, our organizations have got to strengthen their consumer brand. But the brands work in concert with each other, and one will make the other stronger. So branding is key, and we've got to fight for resources for it.
Absolutely. Priyanki, do y'all do quite a bit?
Same thing. I can just tell you that I feel like branding is the most important thing right now when it comes to recruitment and talent acquisition. So, it's funny. I still talk to a lot of people that are like, oh, well, let's just post this on social media and see if we get any responses. And yeah, that's great. Let's do that. But the fact of the matter is you're probably not going to get any responses. When I say branding, like what we're really doing is we're doing a lot of things right now, like via LinkedIn. We finally got an Instagram profile, and kind of like what Nicole and Karen were saying, there's different types of generations we're dealing with. So we feel like obviously the millennials and stuff like that, they might be checking Instagram and they might be in it to win it, on specific platforms. But overall, we're just trying to use various platforms to really get that brand awareness out there versus just generating candidates. It's more of a long-term, really nice solution. So we're starting to do more stuff like show who we are as an organization, what we're doing with our employees, showing people that we're like a great place to work. We're really fun. Like, when it comes to being in a dental practice or even at a hospital, it's kind of obvious. Like a doctor will always wear a lab coat. Like why are we continuously just putting those same pictures with that same physician with a little lab coat? Like we know doctors know what doctors look like. Like that's obvious. So like we want to see like, hey, what are the doctors doing at work that's fun, or after work with their colleagues that's fun? Like, are we doing different things like, giving out free CEs or CEUs to our providers? Like what are we doing as an organization to really, support our providers? So, blasting jobs, sure, I'm still for it and we should continuously do it. But we're looking at, LinkedIn and Instagram and Facebook and stuff like that, just to kind of show who we are as an organization and build our brand that way. So
Absolutely.
Yes.
Good way to talk about your culture too. That's
Yeah.
very good. Hey, let's skip to a quick poll question. We have another one because we want to hear from you. Which tactics do you currently use to source talent? So select all that apply. It's job boards and career sites, referral programs, social media, career site, paid advertising, past candidate outreach, and candidate database. So let's take about 30 seconds. All right, do we have our responses? Okay. So y'all, it looks like everybody's really doing a good shotgun approach and getting word out there every way they can, which is exactly what I would recommend. So, but interesting, we'll keep it up there for just a second in case anybody wants to write any of it down. And we'll be sending you this information as well. I'm going to kind of skip along a little fast. I think we're running a little short on time. So let me go to Karen. I'm just going to ask a question of each of you. So I'll let Karen answer. We won't have all three of you answer each one. Karen, I'll direct this one to you. A question I get a lot is how to improve candidate quality. Very interesting question. This is, it's a hard one to answer, I think. I like to use the analogy, as you said earlier, about the frogs, right? So you don't have control over who's looking for a position, and you don't know what their specific needs are before reaching out. So how do you approach this to improve your candidate quality?
I think she may have dropped off for a second.
Then we are going to skip, and we'll come back to that one if we need to. Let's go to the next question was for Priyanki. We got several questions during the registration process about comp, such as how and when do you bring it up? And you touched on it earlier about using that as a tool to be able to see if you have to step it up to get things going. But what can you do if you're not able to be competitive in the market financially?
Yeah, so there's a lot of things going on where I think in a lot of states in the US, which is good or bad, now they're requiring salaries to be posted on job postings and stuff like that. So you know, it's not in every state, but I've heard about many states going through that. So there's a lot of dance around that. I guess the fact of the matter is I'm a big believer that you probably need to be.
I think we're losing people slowly. So with that being said, let's go to Nicole's question. Nicole, you get a choice. You can either answer Karen's or if you'd like, how do you use the recruiting funnel to plan for your recruiting needs, both in terms of staff and budget? But seriously, you answer either one.
You know, I think in terms of the quality candidates, like you said, it's a really hard question to answer. But I do feel like we have really tried to push our referral bonus program because we find that a lot of the best referrals come from our existing medical staff. And I think that, you know, maybe sometimes we don't think about really engaging them enough, but we have sort of tried to market our program. As far as the recruitment funnel, the second question you had, how do we use the recruitment funnel to plan for our needs? You know, right now we're doing a lot of strategic planning for 2022, and that involves looking back at 2021 and figuring out where are the holes. You know, we can very clearly see where there are some specialties where we're really struggling, and I think everyone probably is. There's a supply and demand issue everywhere, but especially for certain specialties. So we're trying to figure out how can we be more aggressive right from the start in 2022 for those areas and those specialties where we know that it's going to take, you know, a year, and it's going to really take a lot of sourcing to try to find someone. I think that, you know, we have these action plans that we develop for our priority needs. And, you know, it might be we do these three things when a need opens, and after 30 days, we do this, and after 60 days. So some of these difficult specialties, GI, urology, psychiatry, I mean, we're just kind of implementing the entire action plan in the beginning because we know we're going to have to do everything possible. So we're sort of trying to figure out how to budget for that.
Yeah,
next year.
That's a great answer. Let's see, we've got, I think, one last of the pre-populated questions. Which this is the age-old question. Which specialties do you typically have the most issues with?
Yeah, I mean, I think I just said it, right? We're having psychiatry for years has been incredibly difficult. And I think
Their age is getting accelerated. I mean, it's such a huge percentage over the age of 55.
yeah, and with COVID, we've found that most providers are looking for telepsych opportunities. And we have inpatient units. So it's been sort of a challenge because we seem to have trouble finding someone who actually wants to relocate and work, in an office, in a hospital. Urology for years has been very difficult. Again, the age issue. I think that we had some specialties where we did have some early retirements because of COVID.
Yes.
And GI, we're seeing some GI compensation across the company that is frankly kind of crazy. We're seeing some really crazy offers out there, and it can be difficult to compete with that sometimes. But yeah, those are and neurology as well.
Yeah, you've nailed a bunch of them. Those are tough specialties, and you know what, they're all tough, and it gets, and to your credit, it also gets tougher in rural America. 20% of America is rural, and 10% of the physicians in America work in rural America.
Right.
So you got your hands full. So I applaud you. Let me ask you this, since it's you and me at this point, it looks
right.
like.
You don't have a choice. You're stuck with me.
We'll just have a fireside chat. That's good. What platforms do y'all use on affecting diversity in advertising? How do y'all get the word out there that we're equal opportunity and we are looking for people to fill some of these needs?
CHS has a diversity and inclusion department, and they help with the general branding of that message for the entire company. And I would say, honestly, we have a very diverse applicant pool just by nature of posting on the job boards that we utilize regularly. So not that it's not a focus, it's just that it hasn't been a huge issue for us to try to overcome.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And the last one that we had pre-populated here was, how do you build brand awareness in markets new to your efforts?
I haven't had a new hospital come up in a while, but I can give a couple examples where we had satellite hospitals that we built off of them, where we have an existing facility. And a lot of it is doing the things like, and we need to get better at it, but social media, more getting people aware of our culture and our organization and getting the name out there. We're utilizing a few third-party vendors that we're trying that do sort of advertising and marketing management. I think when you're in, I know Karen and I just mentioned this on the practice call, I think when you're in a large company, you have a marketing department, but they are focused on so many things. We don't get a lot of their time for recruitment. So we really kind of have to handle it on our own. And our department is on almost every job board, I think, that's out there. And, for the hard searches, we do utilize third-party firms like Jackson, retained firms. So yeah, I think it's difficult for a brand new, something that's new to us to kind of make a splash. It's been a challenge, but we just try to get out there as much as possible and engage with those candidates. We've got a really healthy database of existing candidates, and so we do a lot of marketing through that tool.
Okay, great. It looks like we're getting down to the end of the wire, so let me see if there's any last questions. Let's see. Oh, this is an important. Who signed my footballs? Those were the world champion Denver Broncos. That was a good question. I like that. Let's see. We had one question. What are your benchmarks for number of openings per physician recruiter? I think somebody addressed that earlier, but I don't know that we specifically spoke about that individually. I know Karen mentioned it, but Priyanki, how about you? I see Priyanki rejoined us. How about opportunities per recruiter do y'all deal with?
So if the question is like how many open requisitions per recruiter, for right
Yeah.
now in my organization, we're growing and we're probably down. We're definitely down. We're looking to hire one additional recruiter, which hopefully he accepts. I have an offer out to him today.
I hope we're not going after the same one, but go ahead.
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, I hope not. But anyways, right now, each recruiter is averaging anywhere from around 25 to 40 requisitions. I know it's a big number, but like, for instance, I would say if you would have talked to me 2 weeks ago, I personally had almost 40 requisitions. And then I hired a bunch. So right now I'm at like 24, or
Okay.
24 or 25, something like that.
Yeah.
So
Nicole, what's your averages?
We're probably somewhere in the 45 to 65 range. It does vary because of our markets, right? So we have markets where there's a whole lot of activity, and those recruiters tend to have, a lower number of requisitions. But if they're in a more rural area, they can generally handle more because they're not reacting as much to applicants. But I think that we'd like to get it down to 40. We think that's probably a sweet spot. I know Karen said 75, and we've been at 75. We've been at 100. We've been at 120. And
Wow.
what we've found at that level is you're just kind of processing, right? You're just reacting. So and I know that for retained firms, I've heard, the numbers much smaller. Is it 15 or 20 maybe?
Yeah, I mean, I'm one of those unusual people. I have a little, of course, I've been doing this since the wheel was invented, but I've over the years of just trying to keep everything so relational and making sure you're taking care of people, you're not so overwhelmed. I focus more on us for a number of clients as opposed to searches, because you may have, 10 clients with one search each, and you've got 10 searches, or you may have 8 clients and you could have 40 searches. But there's always, as you guys know, there's always that bandwidth too, especially if it's a place that has one recruiter. It's like, how many interviews can they do in a month? So even if there's a lot of searches, that doesn't worry me as much as being able to have too many clients, because I want them to have the bandwidth to give that attention to every client. So that's kind of the way we look at it, but y'all don't have that luxury.
Yeah.
I think we're probably up to the end, unless y'all have any closing thoughts or anything. Karen's back. Hi, Karen. Oh, nope. Don't see her. Never mind. Any closing thoughts by y'all?
I have a closing thought, and I'm sorry for the technical difficulties earlier. It was kind of funny. I was like talking, and then I was like, oh, why isn't Tony responding?
I thought you just dropped the mic,
No, I was like talking hardcore about comp and all that stuff. Anyway, so for closing remarks, I just want to say thank you all for attending, and Tony, thanks for, I guess, sponsoring this. It was a pleasure to connect with you all, and nice to meet you all. Feel free to follow me or reach out to me via LinkedIn. I do put out a lot of content about what it's like to hire in the healthcare world. So please feel free to follow me. And I guess don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions and stuff like that. I'm happy to help and support wherever I can.
And I do love this. I love bringing everybody together, support each other, and be there for each other, and pick up the phone when it's needed, because we all need somebody to talk to sometimes. Sorry, Nicole, I interrupted you.
No, I see a lot of questions on the side that we didn't get to. So, I'm always happy to network and share ideas. If anyone wants to contact me, please feel free.
And I'll take a look at all of these, and if you'd like, I'll answer some, and maybe the panel, let's just split it up, and we'll take some turns at who's most appropriate to answer them, but we'll definitely get your questions answered. But thank you all so much. I appreciate it. It's great spending time with everybody, and hope to see you all soon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.